Hey there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father and son talk about fantasy, science fiction, and other nerdy things that we enjoy. Today, we just got the father and not the son. There's someone else here today. I have a guest with us as we're going to talk about something we've been reading that we really enjoy. But before I jump into that, before I introduce my guest, I do want to remind you, if this is something you find enjoyable, let us know by clicking that like button down below. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, we humbly invite you to do so. Down in the show notes, you'll find other ways that you can interact with my son Zach and I. You'll also find where you can find this guy. So Colin, welcome to the channel. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Jim. It's kind of a long time in the making, right? We've been chatting about maybe collabing about something for, I don't know, 6 or 7 months now.
Yeah. So
here
tell
we
the
are.
people out here who you are and where they can find the things that you do.
My name is Colin from the YouTube channel Colin's Corner, where I talk mainly about fantasy, science fiction, some horror, but I will be trying to branch out and just expand my reading palette a little bit this upcoming year. But those are my mainstays, my pillars of the channel, and my main interests. And you can find me on Twitter. I'm pretty active on there. It's Colin's Corner YT. If you search me on YouTube, you might have to search Colin's Corner YT also, because there's other Colin's Corners out there, and we need to usurp them.
Yes, you got to get that trademarked, my friend. Trademarked.
So yeah, that's where you can find me. And I, like I mentioned, I pretty much talk about the same stuff that Jim and Zach talk about. Some nerdy stuff that I love to share with others.
There you go. I recommend you check out Colin's Corner. I subscribed. There is interesting stuff there. He does share a lot of things that we're interested in as well, but everyone brings their own takes to things and has their own flavor. So if you like our channel, you'll probably like his too. Go take a look. So today we're here to talk about Malazan, Book of the Fallen, a fantastic book series that both Colin and I are working through. Zach is on it too, but he's like a third of the way into book one. So I'm glad he's reading it, but he's going slow. And understandable, book one is it's a little tough to first get into. You know, I like to think of it as the gatekeeper of the series. If you can make it through Gardens of the Moon, okay, you're going to like the series. Keep going. But some people can't do it. They just can't.
It's different. I'm assuming we're going to get into a little bit about why that's so, but
Yes.
Yeah, it's an experience, I will say.
Right.
For sure.
100%. So as you guys are watching this video, we do want to remind you that this is spoiler-lite. We're not going to be discussing plot points here today. We're not going deep into revealing what happens in the books. And I can guarantee that because neither of us have finished Malazan yet. We're both first-time readers. I'm halfway through the core novels. Colin, you're not quite as far. I think you said, Sam, move out of the way. You're right in this one.
Yep, almost dead center of Memories of Ice. So I'm the first third. I guess not by word count, but by book, yes.
There you go. And so it's easy for us to not reveal how things end. We have no clue yet. But we also don't like to ruin the experience for others. So this is a safe spot if you are only partway through Malazan or haven't read it at all yet. But this would be a great thing to listen to. You might discern, yeah, maybe you should. You should read it. And it's certainly one of those things that a lot of people aren't sure they should read because they're like, ooh, I've heard scary things. It might be too much for me. I'm not sure I could handle Malazan. I certainly heard things like that when I first heard about the series. Yeah, I didn't know it even existed for years and years and years. I'd kind of fallen behind on what was newer coming out in fantasy. I've been a fantasy reader since a teenager, but I'd never heard of this. So I think it was 2021 when I finally heard about this Malazan thing and started thinking maybe I should try it. They're like, "Oh, it's really hard. It's really tough stuff." And some people, other content creators, going, "Oh yeah, I tried Malazan. It's too much. Nah, I've got other things I'll enjoy. This is just way too much of a series." Well, that just sounded like a challenge. So
Right.
I got to it. I was going in, going, "Okay, let's see what this is all about." And I'll agree, Gardens of the Moon, it just drops you right into things, and it can be hard to figure out what the heck's going on. And I mean, who's the hero? No, it doesn't work like that. It's a very different kind of story, but I loved what I discovered. How did you first hear about Malazan, and what was your experience like deciding to go into it?
So I kind of similar to you, and probably around the same time frame. I would say 2021. Um, I had so we'll take it back all the way to kind of just briefly how I stumbled upon booktube, and it was when COVID first,
COVID brought a
big
lot of
C,
us into
yes,
this. Yes.
the big C first. So I had got into just reading again. I picked up a book randomly, and some of the first couple of channels that I found were Mike from Mike's Book Reviews, and the first two channels that I actually subscribed to were Mike and Jimmy from the Fantasy Network. I'm not sure if you are familiar with Jimmy, but
That one, I mean, there's so many out there. That one I haven't come across, but certainly Mike.
so Jimmy is got a wonderful community, and I was kind of just following his journey because he's a big A Song of Ice and Fire fan, and his like kind of mission statement when he started his channel was to try to find the next series that made him feel like A Song of Ice and Fire. And so he's getting into some of these bigger series like Realm of the Elderlings, and eventually it leads him to, and you'll have to forgive me because my brain always just says Malazan, and I can't break it from saying that.
And you're
I don't know
right.
if
That's
that's
the
right or
correct
wrong.
way.
Like, is
No,
it?
no, that's how
Okay,
Erickson
I don't
says it.
know. Okay, I don't
That's how
know.
I've
That's
heard
just
him
what
say
my
it on
brain
interviews.
says. Okay.
But I
So
just always saw Malazan, and I can't
it's
let
interesting
go.
because the audiobook narrator doesn't always say Malazan. It doesn't matter according to Erickson anyways, but my brain says Malazan,
Right.
so you'll hear a bit of a discrepancy between Jim and I on that front.
We're
But
embracing all
so
types here now. See, it's
we
all
we
good.
are. So Jimmy got into it, and I wasn't uh, reading it at the time, but it was like I just started seeing his videos for the first couple of books that he did, and I didn't watch the live discussions because I didn't want to be spoiled. But I had, I just he was so in awe of what this series was doing in comparison to other fantasy that he was reading, and so I started obviously seeing around that time more stuff was becoming popular around Malazan
I didn't
content.
get that. Could you try again?
Were reading it and putting out these videos saying this is really complicated. I don't know, you know, if this is for me, whatever. So I started to get interested. My interest was piqued in the series, but I was a little bit intimidated. So I just started like picking up books when I saw them in order at
Hmm.
Barnes and Noble. Like they don't always have all of them, and I think I'm still missing one, but I picked up Gardens of the Moon one day, and a couple months later, I stopped back, and Dead House Gates was there. So I started collecting them until I was ready to go, and that's kind of how Jimmy from the Fantasy Network would be in a roundabout way how I first heard about the Malazan Book of the Fallen.
Okay. Uh, you kind of described then too, where I wanted to think about hesitations. Did you think for yourself that it might be too much for you? Did you ever doubt that you would enjoy this series? Or were you like, nah, I'm all ready?
I think with this, uh, I tried to temper my expectations a little bit because there's obviously the clickbaity videos out there that are like, I tried Malazan and don't do it. And I'm like, okay, it's a book. It's a book. And part of the reason that, I enjoy reading is to be challenged. And it's not like I'm an English native speaker trying to read a series in German. Like, eventually, I figured I would, and I'm also, I know this about myself as a reader. I'm not one of the readers that needs to know exactly how everything works all the time. And I knew I wasn't going to know that going into Malazan. So yes, I was a bit intimidated, just because of the sheer volume of pages, and I knew obviously by that how much content would be here.
Mm-hmm.
But then I started to see all these videos and discussions people were having, and there's so many online resources to figure out information if you want to, that intimidation kind of slowly just started to like tick down, and then the excitement to get to it started to tick back up.
There you go.
And until they aligned where I was like not intimidated, really excited, I was like, all right, let's do this.
Yeah, yeah. My preparation, my training for Malazan, certainly had to do with I'm not afraid to read long, complex, robust series. When it comes to long, I've read all of Terry Brooks' Shannara series. I've read all of Feist's Rift War cycle. 30 plus books, tons of material. These things do not scare me. I've read The Wheel of Time many times. There's a lot of pages there, a lot of characters, very complex, lots of stuff going on. So that okay, I can handle a long, robust series. But would it be something I'd really get hooked on? Would it truly draw me in? That was the question. That's what I wondered, because I'd also tried Gene Wolfe's The Book of the New Sun, which some people absolutely rave about. This whole podcast's on the reread of it and getting deep and all the stuff, and I hated it. I read
Really?
the whole thing, but I hated it. It was like, I want those weeks back. But I made a point to read all the way through it because everybody said how wonderful it was. And if I was going to speak harshly, I wanted to speak from a place of knowledge. So I'll never reread that one. So I'm like, okay, which side of the spectrum was this going to fall is where I'm going in, knowing it's a divided series. People who love it and people who will never touch it again. So those were my only hesitations. And when I got into Gardens of the Moon, I certainly was ready to see which way it was going to lead me, and all I found was I like this. This is interesting. It's not holding my hand. It's not giving me all the answers, like I said, and I don't need to know all the answers. It's a mystery that I'm learning about as I go, and it fascinated me. And just getting dropped right in the middle of what's clearly this massive epic story, and you're just getting little snippets and pieces, and it's a puzzle it's putting together over time. It was working for me. So that was my Gardens of the Moon experience, that you get to the end and you really don't know what you know yet, and you don't know what you don't know yet. You just know some things, and you
Yes.
probably liked it, especially by the end of the book. Now, I got to ask you, because I moved from that to obviously book 2, Dead House Gates, which you have also read, and very different, which sets some people off. They're like, they think they're finally figuring out by the time they get to Gardens of the Moon, and then it's, what happened? It's such a shift, and barely any characters you recognize. It's just like a totally different story. Some people can't make it through that. Did you have any challenge like that when you moved on to Dead House Gates?
I didn't, and I've heard this, and I've heard both sides of this. And my experience was, and I said this in my Dead House Gates review, which Steven Erickson actually watched and put a very thoughtful comment on the video.
Wow, you've arrived, my friend. You've arrived. Look at that.
I think it's cool when authors like to mingle and aren't like just hating on people that don't agree with what they're doing.
I
You know
agree.
what I mean?
Yeah.
He's very thoughtful, and you can see him in the community all over the place, like
I have
making
noticed that. Yep.
appearances. And he my experience with book 1, and it's funny because it's timely as far as where we are in the calendar year, but my experience with book 1 felt like you come downstairs on Christmas morning, you're a kid, there's presents everywhere. And for the first like 20 minutes, if you're a family that like has their presents wrapped, you're just running around unwrapping presents. You're like, oh my God, look how cool this is. I wanted this. Then you go over here and you got something you didn't even know you wanted, but your parents are paying attention or someone was paying attention. And they're like, oh my God, I got this. This is so cool. And you don't really know how anything works yet. You're just unveiling things, and you're just kind of in wonder and awe, like, oh my gosh, this is mine, or oh my gosh, this is happening. That's how book one felt for me. I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't know what I was gonna get into, what I was gonna play with for a little bit and then want to put down for a while. Like, I just was really excited the whole time. And then book two for me kind of felt like I was sitting down with a toy and I was opening it and like reading the instructions and getting to know it. Like, I felt like I was more keen on what to pay attention to, like what Erikson does as an author. So I was kind of picking up on a little bit more of the foreshadowing. I was more comfortable not knowing what was going on, so I wasn't worried about trying to figure things out. I was just along for the ride, trying to figure this toy out that I had in my hands, and just kind of in like absolute awe of the tonal change between book one and two and how well for me that it worked. I mean, book two was like just, there's a lot of heavy stuff that happens in book one, but right off the rip in
Next level in book two.
It's like, oh my gosh, like this is
Yeah.
nuts. This dude is not messing around.
My experience, book one, I like the way you describe that. There's just so many things thrown at you and so many different things happening in book one that you don't even entirely know what you've got yet. But it's cool. Book two, now it gets serious. Now he's throwing the real heavy stuff at you. And there were times in book two where I'm like, holy crap, this is just so heavy. And there are parts of it that by intention feel like, oh, this is going on forever. This is so, but not in a bad way, just,
Yeah.
And then you get to the end of that book and I'm like, a couple of different things in particular. Again, we're not talking plot points, but there's some mind-blowing moments at the end of the book that's delivers in such an amazing way. I like to think that if somebody is going to try Malazan and they go through book one and they're still not sure, that's fine. That's fine. Hopefully you liked enough, keep going. And then they get to book two and still, this is a lot of stuff. I don't know, man, but make it through. If you make it through book two and then you start book three, you're in. That's it. You're in and you're not going to quit. Because you're at a great place now in Memories of Ice. Now it's like, oh, this is so cool. This is such a great story. Whoa.
Yeah.
At least that's how
things are happening now.
Yeah.
Specifically where
in
I'm
a lot of ways, book
two.
one and book two have set things up that now book three can build off of. And so does the rest of the series in some interesting ways.
Yeah. And, I think, trusting Erikson to get you there that was a big thing for me too, I guess. So Erikson has kind of, at least in our small little corner of the internet, he's kind of become a household name. I mean, people know who Steven Erikson is now. When I had first heard, like when Jimmy first decided to read Malazan, I had no idea who Steven Erikson was. And he wasn't a presence in the community, and not a lot of people had read and finished the Malazan Book of the Fallen yet. Some people had, but not people that I were watching. And I think in the very beginning when it was first blowing up, it's a lot easier now that I've started so much later than so many other people and there's content everywhere. Uh, I trust Erickson now because I know who he is generally, and I've got enough evidence of people too that have finished the series and loved it.
Yeah.
I've got enough evidence to trust that he will get me to where he wants to get me. And at the beginning, I would say part of my intimidation level was that I didn't know who he was. I didn't know a lot of people that had finished this and gotten to the end
Mm-hmm.
and spoke about how much they loved it. So it was hard for me to trust that this author was not just doing all this random stuff for the sake of doing all this random stuff. But I don't have that hurdle to jump over anymore. Like I just,
Right.
like I said, like I'm just along for the ride, man. Like take me
Yep.
where you think I need to be, and maybe I'll catch stuff. I still don't really know exactly what's going on, but I'm cool with it. I
Yep.
generally have a better, overall understanding of kind of the politics and, but still, there's a ton of stuff I don't understand.
My understanding of this series is really the birth of it goes way back to just Erickson and Esselmont, gaming and creating this world between themselves, and then eventually they both decide to start writing things about it, and create this story out of this stuff they just made up together, which is fascinating. Uh, but I'm through those first 5 books, and I still feel like really this was setting the stage still for what's coming in the rest of the series. There's so much to it. It's such a complex, well thought out world that they have built that it's a lot of fun to hang out in and just
Oh yeah,
see so much. Oh, it's been pretty impressive for me.
I agree.
So, once I started Gardens of the Moon, I knew there was enough here. I was going to finish this series. I tend to be a completionist. I don't like to leave things undone that I've started, but if I have to, I'll DNF it if I have to. It's just that's a very small list of things that I've not finished. This one, oh no, it was easy. As I'm working through the first book, I knew this was for me. Did you feel the same, or did it take the second book to definitely convince you, yep, I'm going to go all the way? Or are you still not sure?
So obviously, I had already said I started pre-collecting the books. I think, already predetermined that I was going to give this the good old college try, and I think it's earned enough respect in the fantasy, at least, community. There's some series that I think have just earned the right to be given a good, solid try. And so I think I predetermined, like I said, that I was going to really at least read the first 2 or 3 books in
Hmm.
this. And I'm the same way you are. I just recently DNF'd a book for the first time since starting a channel and for the first time in like over 2 years. Like I just, at least physically, because I do a lot of audiobooks too, and even those
Yeah.
I'll kind of power through. I do not often DNF a physical read. A series is a little different, but still part of my brain is like, hey, you you gotta finish this at least and see how it ends. So in terms of with Gardens of the Moon specifically, it didn't take me long. I think like 200 pages in, when I still had like really no clue what was going on, I was just, I'd find myself just like, I can't put this down. I don't know what's happening, but I can't put this
Yeah.
down.
Exactly.
So I think I
Yeah.
knew at that point, like, all right, let's go. I'm in.
So there is a lot to these books. It's not something you can just fly through. I like to think the books really make you think. You know, like there are plenty of books I also do on audio. I can't picture doing these on audiobook. It's certainly not my first time. Maybe a reread, but I have to be able to absorb. And I think that's part of what's so compelling about these stories. There's so much to them. you need to take the time to really process what you're reading. And you mentioned foreshadowing, that there's, in Dead House Gates, you started to really see some of the foreshadowing that he was doing, but it's all over Gardens of the Moon too. I mean, there's so much foreshadowing in these books that you could easily miss if you really
Oh, yeah.
weren't taking the time to ponder. So honestly, after each of these books, I've not moved right on to the next book. I've gone off, read something else, then come back. And I find that while I'm away, I'm still thinking about what I read. Even though I'm reading some other book, I'm still processing. That is so fun. It's
Yep.
one of the things that, engages me in this. What are some of the things that you find compelling about this experience of reading Malazan? I'll try it once for you.
So a couple of things stand out. I think the first, and I kind of touched on this in a couple of my first two reviews, is Erickson puts a ton of trust in the reader to figure things out. So
Oh
I
yeah,
talked
no
about,
hand holding.
yeah, I talked about trusting Erickson to get us there, but it's not in a heavy-handed way, like, at all.
Yeah,
He doesn't assume the intelligence level of any reader. It feels like he's got a story to tell. Here's the information. Do with it what you will. That's what it feels like. And there's a certain level of like, oh, thanks, man. Like, I got this. Like, you trust me. You don't need to tell me exactly why everything's happening. You don't need to give me the lore history of every race you're introducing as you're introducing them. Because there's stuff that, like, I'm learning about races we met in Gardens of the Moon that I'm just now learning about in book 3. Like, he
mm-hmm.
he didn't feel the need to tell me why this was the way it is or why these two races, he just kind of says stuff. He gives you the information. He gives you the
Right.
facts of the world, and you make sense of them as you go. And then the other thing, and I've heard that this is influenced by, which I haven't read, Glenn Cook's Black Company.
I've heard that. Yep, haven't read
Um,
that yet either. It's buried
I
on the
own it,
TBR still.
yeah.
Yeah.
But one of the most unique things for me, in terms of, I haven't read many, if any, books like this, at least in fantasy, is there are characters and groups of characters that I've grown to like following, but there isn't, and you mentioned this too, like, there isn't a big baddie, there isn't a hero, there isn't a single cause that's very obvious to get behind, because even many of the characters and the groups of characters that I enjoy following are part of something inherently not good.
Right.
But it's just weird because I can't tell you why some of the characters feel bad and others don't. No one is really like doing anything straight good or straight bad. Everyone's just kind of trying to survive in this world, and there's people caught in the trappings of like the government and just having to do things even if they don't want to do them just because of the position that they're in or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Like, there's so many layers to this world, and in not having just a single like Frodo to get behind, it's different. Not having a single Sauron to go after. It's like,
Right.
I don't know what the answers are. I don't really know who I want to win. Like, if I want anyone to win. Like, I don't know who I want to. I don't even know if that's what this is about at all. So that,
It's true.
wrapping my head around that has been interesting, because usually in fantasy it's kind of just, sure, there's morally great characters, but there's usually an end you kind of want and kind of don't want. With this, it's not like that. It's again, it's just like, here's what everybody is doing. Here's how everyone's handling the events of this world and things that are happening. Do with it what you will. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, totally. And that doesn't change much as you keep going through the books. It's such an experience. Uh, Yeah, it's one of the things that really turns some people off of the series, I think. They want to know, who am I supposed to cheer for? Who are the good guys? Who's the big bad? They want that explained. And that's not what this series is about. If that's what you're looking for, this might not be for you. It's true. But this is definitely something refreshingly different. Yeah, that's rich and that I'm certainly enjoying. I guess another thing that I've really appreciated about this series is uh, he Erickson continues to add in elements that, as you said before, were just mentioned early on, or you heard about this race, this group, whatever, and then later in the stories he'll give you more. He'll find a natural way for you to learn about a different background, a different source, a different motivation that's behind all of these things. And it's why I kind of feel like the first 5 books have almost been set up for the next 5, because he keeps doing that. And yet every one of these stories is engaging. It's got stuff that sucks you in and you care. And then that leads me to just one other thing I'm really enjoying about the series, something that is why I find it so compelling, is his use of humor. Because
Oh
there's a
man.
lot of heavy stuff, okay? And oh my goodness, the stuff that's happening. And yet, all through the books so far, there's elements of humor intentionally put in there. Certain characters that are practically comic relief, and yet not. No one's in there just for cheap laughs. Nobody.
No.
But he can find a way to have little bits of brightness in almost every situation. I love the way that's written.
Yeah, I agree. I was surprised. I think it took me, so I will note that the way I've been reading everything in the series so far is immersively. So I'm reading it alongside the audiobook every time I read
Okay.
it. I'm not
Okay.
strictly reading physically or strictly doing audio. And part of that was because I didn't want to, like you said, oh, you can't really fly through this. And I have the tendency to, like, if I get in the groove reading physically, like even if I'm really tired and I'm into something, I'll just keep going and kind of skim read if I'm really tired and I don't want to miss stuff. So I've found like a healthy speed to like read alongside the audio, and it helps me. It took me probably 200 or 300 pages. Again, like it's kind of that point where I knew I was all in into Gardens of the Moon to realize how much humor there actually was in any number of conversations that are happening between any number of
Yes.
characters. And I had gone into this thinking, because just you hear so much about it, and I had such a serious tone in mind. Like, this is, I don't know what it is, but it's serious and it's hard to understand. And I'd literally find myself like chuckling out loud at some of this. Like, once you get to know some of the characters and their demeanor, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they're very subtle, like feel very human instances of humor that fit the characters that utilize them very, very
Totally.
well. And it's something that really was a pleasant surprise. I'm glad you brought that up for me, is how funny Erickson really is.
Really is. And again, we're not going to ruin plot points, but Dead House Gates, the sappers.
Oh
Oh
man,
my goodness.
so good, so
Yeah.
good. It
Okay.
just feels like I don't know how soldiers talk to each other, but it feels like how they would.
There's got to be some of that at times. There's got to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And aside here, uh, I keep hearing a little chime. Are you hearing that sound, or is it just me?
I'm not, but I'm trying to.
It's
I
it's
had
like a
both
little
my headphones in, so I don't know what it would be. If it
yeah,
continues to
it's like a
happen,
computer sound.
I'm gonna leave one of my headphones out because I turned my notifications off so that none of this would happen.
And I don't know
But
if it's you or if it's me because I'm
I'm
using a
gonna leave
different
my I'm gonna
browser than I
leave my
usually do.
headphone out so that if it's me, I'll hear it.
Okay. Okay. And I haven't heard it since you took that one out now. So
Okay.
if I hear it again, I'll go, "Hey, that was it. Did you hear that?"
Okay. Hopefully, I'll hear it and
Um,
I can find the
yeah, there's
source.
nothing now. Yeah, of course. Okay, are there any challenges you've been finding in reading these books? Anything that has been hard or unpleasant or too confusing? How have you felt?
So, as a student, an employee, a husband, and a father, I think the biggest challenge is really finding the time to just dig in to this book
Mm,
because
yeah.
I'm very interested in them. Like, no problem there. But they're so big that it feels like reading a 50-page chunk is like, it feels like I got nothing done, even though that's 50 pages. So I, and I'll say this too, in terms of like the information coming in, I don't know if have you seen the DLC Book Club? They're another channel
No, I
here on
haven't caught that
YouTube.
one.
They uh, aren't like booktube members. They just are people that heard about this series. Like these, it's a guy named Jeff Katana and Lana something. I forget her last name. It's escaping me at the moment. But they're doing they're reading like 2 or 3 chapters at a time, and they're just talking about where they're at. So I've kind of been following them along, like exactly where I'm at, and then like I'll listen to
Hmm.
them while I'm driving. So I've been doing that, and then when I finished Gardens of the Moon and when I finished Dead House Gates, I'm sure you've seen the wiki, like the Google Docs. Sorry, the Google Docs. There's like a Google Docs out there that summarizes every
I
single
have
chapter.
not seen it because I am so paranoid of spoils,
Okay, well
that I
this
don't even want to
actually
read what somebody's wikied about books I've
okay.
already read
That's
because it
and
might
that's
reveal
fair.
something that I hadn't connected yet, and I don't want to know yet. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fair. So I've been using that after I completely finish one of the books because
Okay.
it's completely broken down like by book and then by chapter. And somebody, it's got to be like a team of people, have like basically given you the information you should know about each character at this point laid out for you. And I completely get where you're coming from too, because some people don't even want that. Like they just want to figure things out on their own
Yep.
or just be cool with not knowing things. But that's kind of been my experience. It's like
Sure.
I'm enjoying living in this and thinking about this world so much that I'm personally seeking that stuff out just because I enjoy it. However,
Mm-hmm.
I want to put the caveat in here of saying that I would still be enjoying this series without that. I don't need that to enjoy the series. I'm just enjoying the world so much that I'm like seeking it outside of actually reading the books also. But to answer your original question, my biggest hurdle is just finding the time
It
to
does
actually read the
take a
books.
lot of time. Yeah, you can't fly through these.
No.
Um, a funny story. When I was reading Gardens of the Moon, I'm partway into it. I'm reading them all on my Kindle. So I
Okay.
bought them all on Kindle. I've got them all waiting for me. The core 10, not all the others. I've bought some of those too. I know I'm going to read them all eventually, so I've picked them up. But my wife and I, okay, we're at a point in our lives where our kids are gone. They're adulting, they're all on their own. It's just the two of us. And our favorite thing to do for an evening is sit down and read. So I do have time to read. Still, it takes a while to get through these books. So we went on a cruise last year and I was on the first book. And I'm going to do a lot of reading when I'm on vacation sitting on a cruise ship. So how many books should I download, to be sure I don't run out? Because in the middle of the ocean, you can't just download another book, you're stuck. So I downloaded, made sure I had the first 3 books on ready. So Gardens of the Moon and Dead House Gates, Memories of Ice, they're waiting in the queue. Yeah, we got back from a week-long cruise. I'm still on Gardens of the Moon, and I'd had hours to read. It just
That's so
takes that
funny. I
long.
had the same exact experience with Dead House Gates because I had started it before we went on vacation this year in August, and I brought like 4 other books with me too. We went on vacation for a week. I came back and I still had like 80 some pages left to read of Dead House Gates. I'm like, I didn't even make
Yeah.
it through this. But I read a
And
lot.
yet, it's so good, we don't want it to rush anyway, right? There'll be a
Right.
time when we're finishing The Crippled God and going, it's done. It was incredible, but and I see that, there's a lot of people who share their reading experience on Twitter as they work through it, and people who, when they finally finish that last book, and they're like, "I've spent all year in this," and yeah, it's a moment.
Yeah.
Which I expect will happen. I've been reading for months. Goodness, I guess since it was the cruise last year, I started back in about March. And
Okay.
I, since March, have read through the first 5 books. Again, I read a lot of other things, so it hasn't been straight through.
Right.
I'll spend probably all of 2024 still reading the last 5 plus the others that I'm interspersing, because it just takes that much time. But that is not a problem.
Yeah.
That's a great thing to know. I've got to look forward to.
I started in August with the group. I'm doing a read along with some other friends from BookTube, and
Hmm.
uh, we were like, we kind of originally were like, we'll do one a month. And as soon as we got to Dead House Gates, I think some of us were like, all right, well, we won't be too strict on that. We'll just kind of see. Because none of us, and you're the same way too, like, I don't want my entire channel and reading life to be strictly Malazan. Like, I read a lot of other stuff too. And I think in order to do a book a month of this and have discussions and make content about it and be a student and a dad and a husband would just be too much. So we've
Yeah.
relaxed our time restraints, and we're just like, hey, whenever we all started Memories of Ice, when we all finish it is when we'll have our discussion. So I can imagine I'll probably be reading throughout all of next year. I don't think I'll finish this series next year. I don't
There
see
you
that
go.
happening.
No problems, really. No problems. Yeah, Zach and I started this channel focused on the Wheel of Time, which we both read completely and wanted to read through, doing a deep dive now on all of them. And yeah, we got a ways in and went, there's too many other things we want to talk about. We can't just do all Wheel of Time. And so, yeah, now we got into everything and all these different things. There's so much to enjoy, so
It
much to
really
love.
is.
And you can't always put a time on it. It's going to take what it takes. And there's nothing wrong
I
with
think
that.
most people understand that too. Most consumers of content understand that. There's some that are like, where are you? Why haven't you been? I'm like, because this isn't my job.
Yeah.
This is a hobby, man.
Yeah. I have kind of gotten addicted to this hobby though, so
Oh, same here.
lately I've been trying to put out something every day. It might only be a YouTube short, but something I toss out there. Uh, and the bigger ones, only Sundays and every other Wednesday that we have a long episode comes out. But it's manageable then. Find ways to work it in.
Yeah, it's difficult if you don't deliberately set aside the time. Because I plan all of my videos out that I record, and unless it's
Mm-hmm.
discussion, of course. But man, it takes a long time to plan a video out, to record it, to export it to your computer, to edit it, to upload it,
Yes, it
to
does.
like it's that's like hours and hours just for one
Right.
video. Unless you're doing a live chat with, and these are my favorite things to do. Are these chats, because I feel like I get to know people. I feel more like just genuine conversations happening.
And not that we put short shrift on these things, but honestly, it does take less preparation, because
Oh,
we're
it
just
does.
sharing what we think, and
Yeah.
talking freely. Yeah. Well, let's move on. I've got a couple other questions. that won't, I don't think will take us long here to kind of tie this up with a bow. Uh, One would be, where do you place this series now? Where do you think it's falling compared to other things you've read and enjoyed or not enjoyed? Is it, do you think it's positioning to be the best thing you've read, or at least the best in fantasy fiction, or top 10%, maybe the top half somewhere? How are you feeling about this? Because for me, the Wheel of Time has been the best I've enjoyed in fantasy for a long time, and this is definitely threatening its perch. This may be the king of the pile by the time I'm done. I'm that much loving this experience. But what about you?
An interesting question, and I think
Purely subjective, of course.
so. I have a strong contender for, and this has been building over the last probably year or so, for strong contender for favorite author ever, who is on their way to unseat Stephen King, who is just an author that
We share the love for
feels,
Stephen King.
yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that he's the most amazing literary wonder of the world ever, but he's an author that feels like home to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of just never, I always just was like, yeah, Stephen King is my favorite. Robin Hobb uh, is really making a strong case
Interesting.
to unseat Stephen King. And the reason that I bring that up is because I connect with the world that Robin Hobb has created and her characters more than I ever thought I would connect to a world. And as awesome as Malazan is in its own right, I don't feel that emotional connection to it that I do with Realm of the Elderlings, but it's still stinking awesome. And I think this is kind of a hard question for me to answer because I still don't know so much. And maybe I will grow a connection to the world, but I'm like midway through book 3 and I don't still think I'm supposed to really have much figured out yet. So I think, and I'm also somebody that has not been reading fantasy like you have for, a number of years and completed a lot of series. Like I've not read Wheel of Time. There's a lot of series that I still need to get to and complete.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of what I've read so far, I would say that this is definitely in the top 10.
Okay, that's fair.
And probably going to work its way into the top 5 the more I get through it, but I'm not there yet. So I don't know.
Yeah, you have some good stuff coming. You really do.
Oh, I'm sure.
Now, Robin Hobb, you mentioned that author. That's one I have to give another shot at some time. There's so many people enjoy Hobb's writing. I've only read the second trilogy of the Realm of the Elderling, so the Live Ship Traders trilogy, and I read
Okay.
that years ago when I'm just jumping from thing to thing. I'm not really focused on what kind of stuff to read. I had no idea Robin Hobb had more books out.
Okay,
These
yeah.
looked interesting. I grabbed them on a shelf. I just picked up all 3 and I'll read these. And I didn't care for it,
Interesting.
which was like, I kind of felt maybe it was Hobb's style of writing just
It could
wasn't
be.
my thing. And so kind of wrote off ever bothering with the rest when I heard there was more. Because I'm like, no, I didn't like the Live Ship Traders trilogy. It's okay. But
Yeah.
I probably should go in and check out more at some point.
Well, here's the thing. It's another really big undertaking, similar to Malazan in terms of
Right?
just sheer volume. And
Yeah.
I've kind of gone to the place, I think a lot of readers find series like this. Like, I've kind of gotten to the place with Realm of the Elderlings, not to change this at all, because I'm sure people feel the same way about Malazan. I don't feel like I need to scream from the mountaintops to get everybody to read this right now, because I genuinely don't know if it's for everybody. And that's okay. I know how important it is to me. And I can share that.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Totally. It's part of the fun of having so much variety in fantasy fiction now. There's something for
Absolutely.
everybody, and not everyone's going to like all the same things. And that's cool.
Yeah, totally. It's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite things I found in recent years is Jim Butcher and the Dresden Files.
I've
Urban
only read 3 of
fantasy.
those. I've only read 3 so far.
Zach is working his way through the series mostly as a favor to me because he knows how much I like it. It's like it's not been his thing as much, but it's growing on him. And it's one of those series that sucks you in the more you go. But a lot of people maybe don't care for the first couple so much. And I'm like,
Are
okay, I
you
get that.
current? Like, are you caught up?
Oh, yeah, I've read everything that's out there and absolutely love it. It's definitely one of my favorites.
Okay.
Um, I look forward to more. Yeah. So everybody has their own preferences, and that's all good.
Absolutely. I'm really enjoying it for the record so far, and I'm only 3 books in, so
Well, good. Oh, it gets better. I mean, 3 is where it starts to take off.
I could kind of tell there was a different. It felt denser, like this is going somewhere.
Yep. And Jim Butcher is another one where there's a lot of foreshadowing that you don't even realize it's foreshadowing
Okay.
in the early
Okay.
books, but you'll see what he does with this stuff later. Yeah.
That's exciting. Okay, cool.
Okay, last question. What type of reader would we recommend these books for? Gardens of the Moon, Dead House Gates, all of Malazan. What type of reader would we say, yeah, you definitely ought to try these? Because they're not for everybody. I really don't think they're for everybody.
No, definitely not. I think and this is a weird question because I don't want to imply any type of gatekeeping, like because I don't
No,
mean that.
no.
Most people reading fiction are reading fiction for enjoyment, and if that is picking up a contemporary mystery while you're at the beach and you read it and you enjoy it, awesome. Kudos to you. Like, that's amazing that you're even reading. I think that this series, though, from what I've gathered, is for fans of the fantasy genre, um, to give it a try, because what I've experienced, and I again will kind of compare this to Realm of the Outerlings because it's another kind of massive series in the genre that I have gained a decent amount of the volume. I've finished a lot of it. What this series, Malazan and Realm of the Elderlings, and some others have shown me is what the fantasy genre is capable of. Because I think a lot of people just think of fantasy as some silly little kids thing. And
Right.
in the constructs of literary fiction and contemporary fiction do not allow do not allow authors to explore the types of themes and the types of conversations that Erickson seems to be trying to drum up are, I feel like, only possible in fantasy. I mean, there's of course a lot of magic going on. There's different races, there's different creatures, there's different things that feel so foreign to our world that they
Mm-hmm.
feel like a safe place to explore because this world feels so foreign. And I
Yes.
think that the fantasy genre allows authors to go there because it feels so foreign, and we can close the cover and we can cozy up in our safe bed here on earth and feel like that's so far away, but it gave me so much to think about. Like, wow, some character that I love is like really going through like something I could never imagine happening here. But it allowed me to explore some emotions that I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be able to get anywhere else.
Yes.
And so I feel like
Yes.
if you're a fantasy fan and you're just interested in exploring what this genre has to offer, this is a staple just to see what somebody that has a great grasp on this genre can really do with the stuff that's allowed in this genre, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. No, very well said. Absolutely. This is definitely not entry level fantasy fiction. Nobody should try this. And again, I'm not going to stop anyone from doing what they want to do, but I would never recommend somebody pick up Gardens of the Moon as their first fantasy read. Hey, someone said fantasy fiction's good. I should try this. You'll run away screaming, thinking this was a horrible thing. And why did you ever do that? And you need to make better life choices.
Yeah,
No,
this isn't Harry Potter.
you work your way up to something like this because this is fantasy fiction that, as you say, it explores robust themes. It's really going to get you to think in ways that get you in touch with some deep emotions, with some hard issues, uh, while still being entertaining. It's still something that you can enjoy reading, but it's deep, it's complex, it's going to make you think. So if that's the kind of thing you're ready for, you want something more out of your fantasy fiction than the fluff you've done so far, okay, give this a try. You will be moved if you can make it through the first book.
You'll be moved in some way. I don't know
You'll be
which way.
moved. You might be moved to absolute confusion and just say, this is not my thing. And that's okay. You tried. There's
Right.
nothing wrong with that. All the people out there who have tried Malazan and now say, no, it's terrible. Don't waste your time. They're doing you dirty because it means it wasn't their kind of fiction.
Right.
And that's all right, but it might be yours. And
Yes.
people should try for themselves.
I agree. 100%.
Yeah. All right. Well, there we go. We've completely said everything that someone needs to know about Malazan, Book of the Fallen.
I would think. Yeah. Before you get into the nitty-gritty spoilery stuff, I feel like this was a pretty good coverage of what you might be heading into if you decide to take this leap.
Yeah. And so if any of you watching this have already read this or are partway through, and you have thoughts on what we've said here today, put them down in the comment box. Let me know. Share what you're thinking, what you agree with, what you may differ on, and I'd love to hear your perspective. If you haven't read this at all yet, and we've inspired you to check it out, let us know that too, because we love sharing our love for fantasy fiction and all sorts of science fiction and fantasy. So, and horror. We don't do much horror on my channel, but a little bit, because I do love horror as well. There's only so much time to read in a day, and it's only so much time to watch things as well. But yeah, let us know if we inspired you to try it. That makes our hearts happy.
Absolutely.
As we shared the joy. Colin, thank you for being here today. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think, slight spoiler alert, we have some more stuff planned together to collaborate on in the future. So I want to thank you for having me on. Hopefully I get to meet Zach at some point, because it was a pleasure getting to finally speak with you, not in person, but in virtual person.
Yep. We'll find a time to have Zach involved. I kind of like him. He's a cool kid. I mean, he's not much of a kid anymore. He's in mid-20s, but to me,
he's your kid.
That's right. That's right. Again, everyone, check out Colin's Corner. Definitely worthy content over there, and some things we haven't talked about yet you can find out on his channel. So take a look and subscribe. We all thrive on the subscribes.
Right.
But that's where we'll leave you then. Any last word, Colin, that you want to share with the masses?
No, I just want to thank you, of course, for having me on. This was a blast. It's even gotten more excitement pumping through my veins to continue through this series, because there's nothing like talking about a book series that I love to make me want to close my laptop screen and head over there and pick up Memories of Ice right after this.
Nice.
But
nice.
You've got a wonderful community. Thank you to anyone that comments on this. I will be definitely paying attention to the comment section to respond to some of you guys as well. And as you'll see at the end of my videos, you guys are always welcome in Colin's Corner as well.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time. And